This right here is a foldable smartphone that, at around $250, is not only one of the cheapest ones that you can buy today, but also has some pretty decent specs for the price point among any smartphone. However, should you actually buy one in 2025? Let's find out. Before I continue on, huge thanks to Kitsch for sponsoring this portion of the video. Kitsch is known for making high-quality shampoo and conditioner bars. And yes, bars. And when they hit me up, I was super curious. Formulated with rice water, these bars are designed to repair damaged hair follicles and prevent split ends while boosting shine and body with regular use. I've been using them for the past 2 weeks, and honestly, I've been impressed with the results. It's cool that they lather up like traditional shampoo. Also, these bars are free of silicone and sulfates, plus, if you pick up their clever self-draining soap dish, that can help keep the whole setup nice and tidy in your bathroom. If you are curious about Kitsch and would like to know more, head over to the link in the description below or scan the QR code on your screen and use code Denki to get 25% off site-wide. With this promo, the shampoo and conditioner combo is under $25, which is super cool. Though, if you end up liking it long-term, they do have a convenient subscription service. Plus, Kitsch delivers to the US as well as over 90 countries internationally. Again, huge thanks to Kitsch for sponsoring this portion of the video. And now, back to our flippy phone. Now, the smartphone we're taking a look at is the Galaxy Z Flip 4, a device that cost nearly $1,000 when it launched back in 2022. And that price point, it was positioned against its flagship flat phone counterparts, for better or for worse. But these days, you can pick one up for anywhere between $200 to $300 in the used market. Spend some time hunting around for good examples, and this can actually be a pretty decent value, especially if you're keen on owning a relatively cheap smartphone with some unique flair. It's been a while since the Z Flip 4 made an appearance on this channel, but I think it represented a moment for foldable phones when they started to feel a little less experimental and more like practical daily drivers, even with some of the imperfections in tow. Certainly compared to the original Z Flip that we saw back in 2020, the Galaxy Z Flip 4 saw tons of improvements, including IPX8 water resistance, a larger cover display. Samsung also put in a ton of work to make the hinge and inner display feel more robust and durable. Plus, the Z Flip 4 also had that year's flagship Snapdragon processor for smooth performance. Not only was this a generation where Samsung's confidence in foldables really showed, but actual adoption for these devices started expanding beyond tech enthusiasts into more mainstream audiences, with Samsung actually selling millions and millions of them. So, what exactly are you getting for your $250 here in 2025? Well, at least on the surface, looking at the build quality on the outside, it still impresses me. We have Gorilla Glass Victus on the bottom as well as top of the clamshell, and this whole thing is surrounded by an aluminum frame. All of this has been doing a pretty good job at warding off the effects of wear and tear, especially considering that this particular example has been daily driven by my boss, Austin Evans, for the better part of a year. That being said, as a device that was used quite regularly, I do want to test the hinge, which does feel quite smooth. It might be a little light on the resistance compared to when this thing was new, and it does creak a little bit, but that is a common issue for these flip phones. I'd definitely be complaining more if we spent closer to that original $1,000 price point, but at $250, that's a compromise I can live with. Especially since, at the end of the day, again, this is a clamshell phone. It is such a unique device, and it folds quite small. Granted, I have a bumper case set up on my iPhone 16 Pro Max, but laying this down on the table and putting the Z Flip 4 on top, and yeah, the footprint is almost half of that of one of the largest flagships that you can buy on the market today. Of course, when folded up, it is a considerable amount thicker compared to a flat phone, but I think that's a fair compromise, especially if you have shallower pockets. The flexible inner display is a 6.7-inch dynamic AMOLED 2X panel with a 120Hz dynamic refresh rate and a 2640 by 1080p resolution. Even by 2025 standards, this display delivers excellent color reproduction, brightness, and responsiveness. Emphasis on the brightness as well, since it does peak at 1200 nits, giving it excellent outdoor performance as well in the sunlight. And then close this guy up to reveal the 1.9-inch Super AMOLED display on the front. While this might be quite small compared to the 3.4-inch display that we see on newer flip models, it is perfectly functional for doing things like checking notifications, controlling your music using quick toggles, and especially taking selfies with the main camera. Honestly, that is probably one of the biggest quality of life features that you have on the Z Flip 4. In terms of hardware, the Z Flip 4 packs a Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 processor with 8 gigs of RAM and storage that started at 128 gigs. Even though this chipset, which was flagship at launch, is a couple of years old at this point, it still holds up remarkably well, especially against today's mid-range offerings. Compared to something like the Tensor G4, which is a chip found in Google's current lineup of flagships, and even the Pixel 9a mid-range smartphone, which starts at $499, and sure, the aged hardware in our Z Flip 4 might fall behind in some tasks, such as AI. However, that 8 Plus Gen 1 is surprisingly on par with day-to-day tasks and even gaming. Playing Zenless Zone Zero, I was kind of surprised to find out that I could still play this game in medium to high settings at 60 FPS, which was actually somewhat better than what I was getting out of the iPhone 16e that I took a look at a few weeks ago. And that phone was $600. Now, on the flip side of things, this phone is definitely thermally challenged, to say the least. A lot of the brains of the operation, the SoC, are all in this top half here, meaning that if you're playing like this, your left hand gets considerably warmer compared to the right. I haven't found this to affect performance in any significant way, even in gameplay. It's more of a comfort thing, that's for sure. Another thing I really like about our $250 Z Flip 4 is the fact that it is updated to the most current version of One UI, which has dramatically improved the experience on this phone since launch. We're talking enhanced flex mode functionality, which we'll talk more about in just a minute. There's also improved multitasking and even some of the Galaxy AI capabilities that we've seen in the company's newer phones. You get them here. Probably my favorite one is Circle to Search, which I find myself using constantly on all of my Android devices. Being able to highlight anything on my screen and look up stuff about it is easily the most practical AI feature in their arsenal. Okay, I've been using the Z Flip 4 as my secondary device for the past couple of days, and I got to say, it's been a surprisingly pleasant experience considering the fact that, again, it is a 2-year-old flip phone. First and foremost, the form factor still feels novel to me in 2025. There is something incredibly satisfying about finishing a phone call by folding the phone shut, or again, having a full-size smartphone that can fold in half and fit in any size pocket. This is the kind of experience that still turns heads even now. Especially if you've never used a foldable before, it is genuinely cool to see how the software adapts to move the controls on either side of the screen. As far as drawbacks are concerned, I don't think anyone should be surprised that you will be making compromises while owning a Z Flip 4 in 2025. And the big elephant in the room, of course, is durability. Now, the good news is that the Z Flip 4 is proven to be more durable than its predecessors, though it is hard to get around the usual wear and tear on these devices, which is definitely way worse than a standard flat phone. The hinge mechanism on my example is okay at best, though it does creak from time to time. Plus, it is especially common to see the hinge loosen quite a bit in the long term. So definitely keep this in mind when shopping around for a used unit. And if you can, try to inspect these devices in person before you buy, because an extremely floppy hinge will definitely not feel good. On top of that, we should also talk about the crease, which yes, you can both see and feel. Now, in my experience daily driving foldables, honestly, it fades into the background after a few minutes of use, at least for me. However, on this Z Flip 4 in particular, the crease is most noticeable when you have light backgrounds on or in the reflections when the screen is off. With all this being said, issues around the crease are definitely more prominent amongst more heavily used units, as they might exhibit more pronounced creasing or even damage around that area. So again, when shopping around, definitely look out for things like lines, discoloration, or dead pixels as warning signs for excessive wear. Should anything go wrong with your display to the point where you'll want to get it serviced, you'll be looking at repair costs that could match or even exceed what you paid for the phone. Not helping any of this is the fact that the factory screen protector, which Samsung strongly advises you don't remove yourself, often shows bubbling and peeling after years of use. Which is a shame because these things are actually really good at protecting that fragile inner display from things like dirt or even imprints from your fingernails. If you are shopping around for a used Z Flip 4, try to find one with the screen protector completely intact. If not for that, you can certainly try third-party replacements, though I personally can't vouch for them. However, here in the United States, we have plenty of brick and mortar options for inner screen protector replacements, including at Samsung kiosks at most Best Buys and even Samsung stores themselves if you happen to live in a city that has one. Again, this is definitely recommended, especially if you want to help extend the life of that inner display. Another compromise with the Z Flip 4 has to be the battery life. Rated for 3700 milliamps, split between two cells on either side of the fold, longevity was never really its strong suit even when it was new. After around 2 years of regular use, a lot of units will start to see some battery degradation. On my particular device, I'm getting around 4 to 5 hours of screen on time, which is almost enough to get me through a workday, but power users will likely need to top up during lunch. This is made worse by the fact that actually servicing the battery on the Z Flip 4 is pretty annoying thanks to that dual battery design. Professional replacement services charge around $180 for a full replacement, or about $89 per side if you only need to replace one. So if you're planning on using this device as your daily driver, it might be worth factoring in this cost into your budget, especially on an example that might be heavily used by the previous owner. Going down the list of compromises, another one with the Z Flip 4 has to be the cameras. The dual 12-megapixel setup was already somewhat of a low point compared to its bigger brother, the Z Fold 4, and fell way short of its flagship counterpart, the Galaxy S22. Now, don't get me wrong, the photos are quite serviceable, colors are vibrant, and Samsung's processing helps to make them look social ready. However, if photography is a priority for you, the camera system on this might be a deal breaker, especially since it tends to fall apart, especially in low light and zooming capabilities. Additionally, regarding software updates, even though this might not be a big deal just yet, in the longer term, we might be approaching the end of the road sooner than you think. For the Z Flip 4, Samsung promised 4 years of OS updates and 5 years of security patches, meaning full support should be winding down starting in 2026 toward 2027. In all fairness to this device, I do think it'll be out of consideration by that point anyway, but just keep this in mind. It is also worth considering that when the Z Flip 7 inevitably arrives later this year, the Z Flip 5 will likely hit the same price point in the used market as our Z Flip 4 at around $250 to $300. And that phone offers a much larger and more functional cover display, slightly better cameras, and a more durable build than the Z Flip 4. Honestly, if you're not in a rush, I would wait for that phone to hit the next depreciation cycle since it offers a much better value. So, is the Z Flip 4 worth $250 in 2025? I might have just been talking about heavy downsides, but I do think that for the right person, this phone could make a whole lot of sense. If you're looking for a secondary device, or perhaps wanting to try out a foldable without breaking the bank, or maybe you just want to appreciate having something different from the typical slab phones that everyone else is making, there is absolutely a ton of value to be had here. You're getting mostly flagship grade hardware, a form factor that's still unique, and performance that can handle basically anything short of the most demanding mobile games and AI tasks. To think of it another way, for the same price as an entry-level phone, you are getting the taste of premium tech that would have cost you 4 times as much just a few years ago. That is absolutely the beauty of the depreciation curve working in your favor, as long as you put in some thought into weighing the risks and finding a good example. But let me know if you would consider a $250 foldable in the comments below. And otherwise, thanks for watching this video on Denki channel.